What's going on, everybody? Welcome to our Restoration Success webinar. I can't wait to get started with this webinar. Restoration Success is a webinar series that covers multiple topics related to the restoration industry and presented by industry experts. I'm your host, Tenzo Wangzor, and I'm the marketing director for KarmaStaff, the sponsor of this webinar. KarmaStaff is a go-to solution for remote staffing in the restoration industry. Whether you're looking to grow your business, hire top-tier remote talent, or learn innovative sales strategies, you're in the right hands with KarmaStaff. So on behalf of KarmaStaff, I just want to thank you all for joining me. And so speaking of joining, we have two very special guests speaking today. First, I'd like to introduce Scott Miller.
Hi, Tanner.
Hey there, Scott. So Scott is the founder of The Growth League and has over 15 years of experience helping small business owners succeed. He has owned and scaled multiple businesses, including a successful restoration company. Scott is an experienced entrepreneur and a great coach to many restoration companies. When coaching owners and his leadership team, his focus is on increasing profitability, reducing chaos, and building sellable businesses. Today, he will share his insight on the power of discipline, unlocking business success. I also have the pleasure of introducing Phillip Rosebrook. Hey, Phil.
Hello.
As one of our speakers today. Phil is the president of Business Mentors and has helped hundreds of companies across North America and even in Australia fully realize compelling visions and strategic plans for their businesses. His role extends beyond planning. He coaches, teaches, and mentors these companies, helping them build solid, scalable foundations. From setting benchmarks to managing finances, from marketing strategies to optimizing production, Philip's done it all. Today, he'll be talking on the topic restoration industry trends, a productive approach to success. So without further ado, we'll dive into the insight from our two esteemed speakers. We'll first start with Philip. And if anyone has any questions for either one of our speakers today, please submit them in the Q&A section, and we'll dedicate some time towards the end of the webinar to address and answer them. So please, Philip, if you will be kind enough to share your screen and take it away.
Yep. Okay. Let's see if I do this right now. Share screen, share window. Okay, perfect. Okay, can we all see that? You got my presentation up there?
Not
Yes,
yet.
no? Not yet. Okay.
There we go.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Good morning. Thank you all for coming. This is pretty exciting, and you put together a really nice event. I appreciate that. So what I want to talk about is what generally is going on in the industry. It's driven by changes to the insurance companies, to their claims handling, property management companies, some social issues and things that I think are going to impact business in general, but specifically restoration. I'm going to talk about how those challenges are going to kind of parlay into what you should be doing in your business, decisions you should be making today. And I talked to Scott last week, and I think it's going to complement well his conversation as well, because I think it's kind of touching on different sides of an issue about how you manage and successfully set up and run your businesses. So I'll talk about a proactive approach to success in an uncertain environment. And I do think that that's what we're looking at. And if you have really paid attention to the restoration world in the last year, it's just different than maybe 10 years ago, and even during the Great Recession that was 2000 and was it 8 through 10 or so. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is I call it a Texas size problem, and the reason I call it a Texas size problem, I was in Dallas with a client a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking to me about his home insurance policy, and one of the things that had happened was his premiums had gone from $3,000 to $20,000 at renewal. And I mean, that's quite a substantial change. And what that tells me is that his insurance company didn't want him as a client. But so he realized, he went back and he started shopping his policy, and it went from 3,000 to 10,000 at renewal. So it tripled in 1 year. The second thing that happened is his deductible went from 1% of his policy to 3% of his policy. So imagine that for just a minute. So if you've got, I'm guessing he had about $1 million house. Dallas, the real estate in Dallas is going through the roof. So probably $1 million house. His deductible goes from $10,000 to $30,000. What happens if your average claim is only $9,000? I think that so we start seeing things changing, and if you look at trends in Texas, California, and Florida, I think they're all kind of in the same market. Their claims are through the roof. Their premiums are that they're having to control their premiums. Deductibles are changing. Florida, they got one company that actually is limiting you water damage losses to $3,500 unless you use their preferred vendor. So insurance companies are taking different approaches to claims handling. And then I also look at issues with losses and loss ratios and risks. And I was surprised to see that a lot of the Midwest states were very, very, some of the top 10 states for damages. So Colorado, Nebraska, Oklahoma, states that are prone to hail damage. And so you end up with a lot of pressure on pricing and premiums and deductibles, and that's changing what's going on for our everyday restoration market. So first is what I call my Texas problem. The second one is a hard market. And so if you haven't heard that terminology, a hard insurance market means that losses are up, profits are down, interest is down. It's tough for insurance companies to be making money. It's hard. People aren't entering the marketplace. We don't have new competition. And this is influenced by inflation and loss and risk ratios and competitive environment. So we've got a hard insurance market, which says that the insurance companies are having to make changes to retain their profitability. So we've got the homeowner problems. We've got a hard market. And in fact, I read an article last year that said that that last year was the hardest insurance market since the early or mid 80s. So think about that for a moment. Their world is changing dramatically, and let's also talk. One of the other influences is inflation. So an insurance company prices a policy based on what they expect the losses to be next year. But all of a sudden you have this surprise inflation, particularly in construction materials and in construction labor, reconstruction, mitigation, all this stuff. The inflation has been going up quite substantially. So the insurance companies may have mispriced their policies for that. Or they're trying to recoup it, and they're raising their premiums quite substantially. The debt problem is something that I'm just paying attention to, because this is national debt, which influences the interest rates. Interest rates, insurance companies have lots of investments, and so as interest rates go up, that's probably a good thing for insurance companies. But as the debt goes up and there's less capital available in a market because it's being consumed by interest payments, which are a drain and a draw on all these economic situations, that's a real issue. And then also from a contractor standpoint, the debt is a problem as well. From our clients, if we look over at liquidity problems and you study the commercial markets, you're saying, hey, I don't have to worry about insurance. I do commercial restoration. Working for Class A offices or doing multifamily or whatever it is. Look at what's happening in liquidity over there, and you have all of these buildings that are sitting. If they expected an 80% or a 90% occupancy rate and they're down at 55 or 60, they have a real problem. They're coming to refinance their buildings, and a lot of that is hitting over the next probably 18 months where they have to go refinance their buildings. And this is a problem as well for those commercial properties. And I think you may see a lot of insolvencies. And so as restoration companies, what do? Our insurance clients are being impacted substantially. Our commercial clients are being impacted substantially. Maybe we have issues within the states or regional municipalities that are also dealing with all of these same problems. So it's important to understand that our business world is changing fundamentally and substantially in kind of a scary way. And if we continue to if we continue to operate our business like we always have, we might be surprised, because we might start expecting some different results. So
hey, Philip, let me interrupt you for a second. I apologize. I think we're not able to see the moving slides. If
I
you can
haven't moved them yet.
Oh, you haven't moved them yet?
Nope.
Okay.
How's that?
Okay.
There's my next
No,
slide.
we're still not able to see.
You can't see.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let's try to exit in that show, and
there we go.
Try.
Now we're here.
You can see all of my slides. Okay, this is
Yes. Maybe this mode is
okay.
the
I'll just
best.
okay. Perfect. Good. Okay. So we also look at so we have all of those business environments challenges. We have the restoration challenges, and now I think we have some societal challenges. And it particularly coming up on what's a really uncomfortable election season for a lot of people. And this creates, I think, challenges within our own organizations. Maybe it's in our community, but it's the people working for us and understand that they're impacted. These are the people we're depending on to go get work done. And if they're feeling, who's it? Zig Ziglar once said, you can't be at home thinking about work, and you can't be at work thinking about home. And so if there's challenges outside of this work environment, it's going to impact the workers that we have and the work that we do and our businesses. And so if you just maybe I follow it too much, but I see challenges of trust, challenges in who our neighbors are, and whether it's immigration, that's impacting the workforce, it's impacting the general, just the communities that we're working in. A lot of fear, a lot of blame, a lot of issues that are all around this. So we take our business uncertainties and we apply them to social uncertainties, and this is going to impact our companies. Probably social changes less, not probably, definitely social changes less than the economic changes, but that's real, and you just need to be aware of it. And I always figure, if we have a place that feels comfortable, if we have strong leadership, if we're operating in an area where we can impact and touch the people that we touch in the communities and make those places better, that now we have a bit of a reprieve. Come to our workplace, and we're going to do work, substantial work of value for our community members. We're restoring lives and livelihoods of people who've been impacted by disasters. And so it's important to understand those things. And so that's kind of my big picture macro setup on this stuff. But I want to look at some restoration impacts. The first one is I see some of either a loss of our everyday claims, because if deductibles and policies are going up so high, people are less likely to turn in a claim. We may find that we're in a retail market for the small residential dryouts, the small 5,000 and under, 10,000 and under. So we may have to figure out, how do we give pricing up front? Are we collecting deposits and deductibles of several $1,000s before we ever get started on a job site? That will require that we change our process internally, our process for how we set up a job, who we send to the project. We get a call, do we send the technicians out, or do we now have to send a responder out, an estimator out, somebody to go take a look at the job, get a contract signed, collect deposits of thousands of dollars for somebody who hadn't really planned for that? So what's our process internally as we look at the everyday mitigation jobs changing? Certainly the good news is we have, not good news, though. The good news is we get to be there during disasters and catastrophes. We are finding more of those, but you end up with the same problem. Now we have it at scale. We've got 1,000 jobs in a marketplace, and the deductibles are all $10,000. So what is our process internally? How are we addressing that? What communication processes do we have? What training are we providing? How do we look at our systems internally to set up the jobs and the markets, the jobs and our employees and our teams for success? Finally, one of the things I think, I've gone through restoration. I've been in the industry for about 36 years, and during that time, I've been through about 3 recessionary environments, maybe 3 or 4. And one of the things you find is that the competition changes quite substantially when the market changes. And so if you have a residential home builder and they've got staff and they've got bills to pay and payroll, they see that fire sitting down around the street and saying, I can do that. And so we start losing jobs we normally would get. And so if I'm a $5 million contractor, or maybe a $7 million contractor, and I'm accustomed to having a $400,000 or $500,000 job on the books at all time, I may find that I start losing 10% of those to competitors who are new to my market or new to this marketplace. If that's the reality, how do we go in and look at? It goes back to our sales skills. our employee and our management skills, understanding that our market changed, our clients change, our work's going to now change, and our competitors are changing. What are we doing internally, and are we continuing to operate our business like we always have, or do we have to be proactive in how we set up and manage our business? And I think this will go as well into some of Scott's following presentation, and looking at the purpose for what we're doing and using that purpose to try to identify, track, and set our parameters for how we operate and run our business. And so understand that those things will be different. They always have been. And so, it just it requires a different skill set. In addition to understanding restoration, it's how do we set ourselves apart? How do we do something different? And what do we look at in that process? So what are the next things? If we're looking at that process, we have to look at our business from a fundamental business standpoint. One of the things I always said, that anyone can lead a business when times are good. So when times aren't so good, that requires really solid, proactive leadership. And so, one of the things that if I studied over the years, out of all of the companies I've worked with for the past 25 years, I tried to identify, like, what makes the really successful ones successful, and where are the challenges with the ones that are always struggling. And I started looking at all the different parameters. And as I looked at that, it kind of came down to the number one determining factor of success in the successful companies, the ones that really grew and did well over years, was their leadership. It was leadership at the top, setting and defining directions, and it was leadership at the mid-level managers. They started executing strategy and process. And so, a couple of things I look at is, the first thing is capital. And as we put our strategic plan together, we got to look and say, okay, capital is really important, and that's going to limit our growth. A lot of people think they're going to grow to their greatest strengths, which maybe it's marketing or production or whatever. But they're going to be limited. And what they don't realize is they're limited by the capital that it requires to fund and grow a business. So first of all, look at your working capital and know that you have the resources to grow your business or to fill and align with your strategic plan. The second thing is just looking at the strategic plan in your business and trying to identify where we're going, how we're going to get there, what resources we need, what are the steps between where we are today and where we're going. I'm a big fan of the EOS policy, employee operating, or the entrepreneurial operating system. And what I like about that is, in setting up that plan, you try to look 3 to 5 years down the road. And when you're doing that, you'll then break it down to a 1-year plan and then 90-day plans. And that assures that you're able to drive your plan through, because you're looking at it on a weekly basis. How are we doing our 90-day plan? How are we doing our 90-day plan? And a year is just the accumulation of your 90-day plans that get you from where you are today to where you want to go. And so the next thing I'd also say, strategic planning, capital, and then cash. In an environment where we're challenged by what's going on all around us, we really have to take control and manage our cash and our cash flow. Focus on your collections, focus on your deposits. Make sure that you have discipline in your budgeting process, both from a job standpoint, but also from an operational standpoint. And then one of the other things I'd also suggest, as we look and say, okay, our clients may be changing, do we define verticals in our strategic plan? Where do we want to work? Do we want to work in healthcare? Do we work for banks? Do we work for multifamily? Do we want to do education, schooling, high schools and in other school buildings? Whatever it is, we need to define the verticals that we're going to work in, because that's going to help us achieve our goals, because we understand that the clients that we had yesterday may not be our clients tomorrow. So there's a whole lot to that, but my advice is, take a look at your strategic business plan and follow a process through that. One of the things that I also look at, in one of the biggest drivers and influences today, is our access to technology. So technology is going to help us leverage our people, leverage our process, and scale our company. And so I have a couple of rules for technology. And the first one is make sure that it helps us scale really good people and really good process without having to add new people to that. how can we make the resources, activities, and the people that we have more effective and more successful with the same amount of with the same amount of people there. So as we grow, can we grow without just having to add people? Develop a strategic plan, as I talked about. Defining process, making sure that we look and say, okay, what are we going to do at scale? What's our process, and how do we get from here to there? And I think a rule that I would look at as I start assessing my technology resources, will it remove steps from process and therefore reducing cycle times? So look for technology, take a strategic approach of what technology you're going to access and use, make sure it meets these requirements, and then at the end, it removes steps from process and reduces cycle time, which affects our service delivery and helps us become more effective for our clients. So I don't want to get into it deep because I think it's a much longer conversation. But in our strategic plan, we need to take a look at it and have some assessment of the actual technology at the field level that we're applying, because we can help scale that and reduce our inefficiencies, and again, scaling our organization, removing steps in the process, reducing cycle times. And so, I've just looked at a couple here and said, hey, Magic Plan, it's great because we're taking the resources we have, our cell phone, and we're dimensioning a project automatically. Or maybe it's DocuSketch or know-how, Capability. These companies, they have technology that help us fulfill those requirements up above, and then scale our resources. So using DocuSketch, just use that as an example. So I had a company that went from sending employees out and writing the estimates on every single job to doing virtual estimating. They brought everybody in-house. They wrote over $50 million in estimates in their within their company, their location. It was a big company. And what happened was, before, you'd have an estimator that a really good one could go write $3 or $4 million in estimates because they're driving to job sites and putting the estimate together. Now, using technology, they can do an average one. When they start, they want their starting estimators to be able to do 4 or 5 million, and their best ones are doing 10 to 15 million by using technology. So look at those technology resources. I can't get into all of those in a short presentation. One of the things also I want to talk about is maybe scaling your resources and looking at people outside of your office, so I don't have to add overhead to add capacity. And that's where, so KarmaStaff, when I saw what they're doing, I thought, this is really fantastic. Look, I can now have skilled restoration people, and I can have them trained, and I can have it at a value that I can actually still operate and manage a budget and meet my expectations. So I can outsource some of my staffing to, I'll call it outsource to my internal team, or companies like Epic Estimating or Upwork, DocuSketch. All of these people allow us to scale our operation, scale our system, while still maintaining that I'm meeting my strategic plan, I'm meeting my budgets, I'm focusing on cash, I'm focusing on capital. So those are resources you should look at, and things and ways in which we've got all these challenges in the industry. We want to try to meet those challenges head on and be effective and successful through that. I'm kind of wrapping up, so I'm running out of time, but I want to make sure that, as we go through the strategic plan, there's things that if our business changes, it used to be we could just be in a program and the phone's going to ring and we're going to get the work that we needed. My suggestion is go back, look at your marketing plan and say, where are we getting our work? What kind of work are we going to do? What are our verticals? Let's define those verticals and let's become really good at them. And so, do we want to be in healthcare? Do we want to do multifamily? Do we want to do care facilities? One of the other things, I got pictures of guys having lunch up here. And what I like about that is just the thought of all business is local, a handshake, referrals, become overlooked in this technology world. And I think that we can be unique and we can have a position in our market where we can be successful by focusing on relationships. And so my advice to you is to really not overlook some of the fundamentals that we always learned and we always knew about, while looking at our SEO, while looking at our referrals and our referral partners, such as plumbers or service providers or whoever it is. And then also focusing on the quality of service that we're delivering, so we can get the reviews, because people are looking at your reviews and they are looking and judging you based on other people's perceptions and performance based on your historical achievements from what you're doing. So Be deliberate and disciplined in your marketing approach and strategy as you look at these changes. So, and when you do this, and as you look at your business plan, make a business case for what you're doing. Focus on return on investment. Look at Power BI and what kind of resources, for example, JOC Analytics, or somebody that even Albiware or other technology resources have really great Power BI, which gives you real-time data on performance and activities, so you can start measuring what's going on in your organization and be disciplined about that. And that allows you to know your numbers. And when you're focusing on knowing your numbers, you can then have accountability within your organization. And I think that's one of the challenges. People don't look at accountability and say, okay, here's our expectations. Did we hit it or not? If we didn't, what are we going to do differently? And if we did, great, can we do more of it? So my closing thought here is that adversity is a mother of progress. I think real growth is going to come through the challenges we have. And yes, we're looking at some challenging times. I don't think we can run our business like we always have. I think we have to do something a little different than we had. So tough times require great leaders. Be a strong leader. Study leadership. That's why I read these books back here. Study leadership and know what it takes to become a great leader in an organization, and then become a market leader. Don't become a market follower. Don't be passive. Communicate exceptionally well internally and externally. Communicate to our clients and end users, to our prospects, and communicate solidly. And then have a really solid customer service plan, because most companies overlook that. They get too busy with being busy. And if you can focus on and perfect your customer service plan, you can create a strategic advantage in your company. So that being said, I want to wrap things up, give Scott some time to come and tell us about working with purpose and the whys of your business. So that being said, there's my contact information. I ran through a lot of stuff, but I figure that this will give us a good perspective of where we're going.
Thank you so much, Phil, for the presentation. It's really, really insightful. Now Scott will take the floor, and he'll be presenting on the power of discipline, unlocking business success. So Scott, whenever you're ready to share your screen.
All right, great. Am I sharing?
Yes, you are.
All right. Phil, that was awesome. I don't know. I hope all of you took, no, I just took a solid page of notes. I can't see the chat, but I know you can, Tenzin. Whose head's spinning after that? Mine is a little bit, right? There's a lot there. And I think it ties in perfectly. So much of what Phil said, I think ties really well into what I'm about to share with you. So how I use discipline in my business today, in the businesses that I've started and scaled and sold. And let's see, why can't I advance my slide? There we go. All right. So I just did this presentation on Friday, and it was a 90-minute workshop where I was going around to the group. It was a group of about 40 owners, and a lot of them brought their managers with them also. So I put the slide up with this little image down here, and I said, who knows what this is? Nobody knew. There were about 50 people in the room. Nobody. So I had to put a little note in here. It's me preaching to the choir, because as I thought about leading up to this presentation today and last week, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here today. You wouldn't be in the restoration business as an owner or a manager if you didn't have a fair degree of discipline already in your life. So I want to let you know that I acknowledge that. I'm not talking to a group of people who are undisciplined. But in the next 20 minutes or so, I want to try to get you even more excited about it. And I want you to pick one thing. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about what I learned and what I come across every day as I'm talking to prospective clients, my existing clients. I'm going to share that with you about this one thing that keeps coming up over and over and over, where leaders feel like they've got to do a better job, and they really believe that it'll make the biggest impact in their business. But also, I don't want to take away from all of the very detailed things that Phil just talked about, where you could choose any one of these things and take action, and it would be impactful in your business. Because as Phil said, we're in a changing environment. The days of you're on a TPA, you get a call, you just go out and there's no real talk about your closing rate, right? You're going to go out, you're going to sign the job, and you're going to get it started. And you're probably not going to even have to collect any money because there's a $500 deductible, $1,000 deductible, and they'll take that out of repairs. That's changing rapidly. So my goal is that at the end of this, 20 minutes or so, you have written down one thing and you've got your next action towards making progress on that one thing on your calendar. All right. So that's my goal for myself, to get you pumped up enough to do that. All right. So for me, discipline is about staying really focused, even when things are uncomfortable or things are really tough. As Phil said, like, it's easy to lead when things are going really well. It's much tougher when it's a difficult environment, right? A different and difficult environment in the insurance world. Maybe even you're challenged with, if you've been in the business for a long time, you're challenged with a different mindset with your team, right? I just had an owner telling me, and I've been in business for 35 years, and I've never seen employees that don't want to work like I have today in my business, right? So maybe it's that challenge that you've really got to face. Again, when it's easy, it's easy to lead. When it's tough and it might not be fun, I think you need something bigger to drive you. And for me, it was when I started in the restoration business in '05. It was the first time that I was in business for myself, and I really needed a big why. I needed something to help me get through those Friday nights at midnight when I was sucking sewage water, or Sunday afternoon cleaning contents in somebody's china cabinet after they had a fire damage, right? When my family and friends were off doing other things. I needed a big why, right? So many authors have written about the importance of your why, right? For me, it was, I could see ahead. Not only that I truly enjoy helping people, but it also needed to be more for me, right? I needed to be thinking about, well, what does this do for my family as I continue to grow this business? My wife and I wanted her to be able to stay home, or have that option to stay home with our kids. We have 4 kids. I wanted to know that I was building something for my future. Um, Most of us, if you're an owner, most of our net worth is very commonly tied up in our business, right? So for me, it was thinking ahead to the future. This is my, or part of my retirement plan. Uh, and again, I think our whys change over the years, right? But I think it's very important for leaders, whether you're a manager or an owner, to be really focused on your why to help push through when things are tough. So, uh, head trash or stinking thinking, right? You've probably heard this term before. We all have these negative self beliefs to some degree, some of us more than others. And for me, it was in the beginning, I'm not a numbers guy. So I have a marketing degree and a finance minor, but I was never, I'm not an accountant, not a bookkeeper. When I started to grow my business, I found about 3 years in, I was totally lost with my numbers. So I needed to make sure that I got very serious about understanding my financials. And I'm still surprised today when I talk to new clients. Sometimes they're, high 7 figures, even 8 figure revenue businesses where the owners don't have a very good understanding of their numbers, right? So I needed to shift that mindset and get really disciplined. This is going back to, it was uncomfortable, out of my comfort zone, not naturally a numbers guy. Over the past 15 years, I think I've transitioned into, I am a numbers guy now, but didn't start that way. What did it do for me? Really, it was peace of mind was the biggest benefit, because even when, and every month isn't going to be a great month, but even when it's not a great month financially, now you've got a tool in front of you that you can actually use. Like Phil talked about, different technology pieces, like different business analytics, JOC, even Albi, all the other platforms out there that are production management for our industry. You can get great data, but you've got to know how to put it in so that you can get good data out. So peace of mind, increased profit, not only for the business, but increased income became potential, a reality for my team members. This other negative mindset. I'm the only person who can do fill in the blanks. How many of you are thinking right now, I can't delegate this piece of the business because I'm the only one who can do that, or I can't have somebody else do this task because I'm afraid it's not going to be done to my standard, right? So again, for me, this is discipline around when something is difficult or you're telling yourself some story about why things have to stay the way they are, they can't be any different, that you really have to push yourself and challenge yourself. When you hear yourself saying, I'm not that kind of guy, or I'm not that kind of gal, or this can't happen in my business because of X, or things are different in my market and that won't work, you really have to challenge yourself. So, removing myself from the day-to-day operations was very important to me for multiple reasons. I wanted to start another business. I wanted to be able to have a business that I could sell someday. I wanted to give more opportunities, more growth opportunities to my team. So once I gave up on the idea I'm the only person who could do X, those things started to change for me. One other thing that I'll touch on, and this is what I talked about, what keeps coming up as the number one challenge for leaders is this idea of why bother? Nobody's going to follow through anyway, right? My team just doesn't do what I need them to do. They're not consistent. They don't follow through. And what changed that for me was implementing, what I call a rock solid accountability system. And also to pick up on something that Phil said, this book is something that's on my desk all the time because it's become such a popular small business book, small to medium sized business book. So many of my clients have read it, are either self-implementing or using an EOS implementer. I used it in my business for the last 5 years that I operated it. So that's what has been coming up over and over. And out of the 40 businesses that I spoke to on Friday, I think there were over 30, maybe 31, 32, who said what I need to work on, that one thing, because remember, back to my second slide, my goal for this session is that you come away with some specific action item. What are you going to get really disciplined about? These two questions, we took about 10 minutes and had people team up. And then I went around the room. Write down the answer to these two questions. Where do you think, as you're listening to Phil about, high deductible small claims, what are we going to do? Do we just keep sending a tech out, or do we send a salesperson out? What are we doing about capital needs? What are we doing about cash flow management? Should we be thinking about new verticals, right? I wrote down all these things. Should we be looking at outsourcing? Should we be looking at technology? Do we have a marketing plan that's documented that we're following, right? And how about you personally? Because again, there's so many synergies to what Phil talked about, and what I'm talking about. Where do you, as the leader, because I see the same thing that Phil sees with my clients, the ones that are the most successful, that are crushing it, even when it's difficult, are the ones that have strong leadership. The ones that are really disciplined about cash flow management, goal setting, planning, a strong meeting rhythm, right? So where do you need more discipline? And where does your business / your team need more discipline, right? Think about all these different things. And I'm going to tell you right now what came up 31 or 32 times. And we talked about everything that Phil mentioned and more. And then this one other thing, clear expectations and accountability. So many times I have the conversation with a client, or a brand new client, somebody who's about to become a client, and they tell me a story about how somebody is a really big challenge for them. They're not doing their job. And I'll ask them, so I'll pick on you, Tenzin. I'll say, Tenzin, well, this manager of yours who's not doing their job, tell me about what does your job description look like, or what does your simple one-page document with clear expectations look like? What are the metrics? What are their top 2 to 5 numbers that would indicate at any point throughout the year, whether they're on track or off track. And I get this. Yeah, I don't have that. Okay. So if you're complaining about Billy, your manager, does Billy know, like, you just pretty clearly expressed to me where he's dropping the ball? Have you had that conversation with Billy? No. Why not? I shy away from difficult conversations, right? I don't want to hurt his feelings, or I'm afraid he's going to quit. We're telling ourselves all these different things. And I usually say some version of this. Well, what happens if Billy doesn't improve? What happens to his job? What happens to his career with you? And the answer is usually he doesn't make it. He's not here, right? So we tend to shy away because it makes us uncomfortable having these conversations. And it's a whole lot easier to have the conversation if there's a document that clearly defines what success looks like for them. And I found that when I can get a manager or a leader to buy into this idea, and again, it's maybe out of their comfort zone, maybe they feel like they're too busy, maybe they don't have the discipline to sit down and define this with their team, or just take some time themselves and define it. But when they do, it makes a huge impact. It's not a guarantee, because sometimes there's just nothing that you can do that's going to improve performance. It's a mismatch, right? But so many times I've got so many success stories about once somebody knows what we expect of them, and I say, Tenzin, here are your three most important metrics, and you have a weekly goal, and every week there's a scorecard, and you're going to see how you're doing. You're going to know if you're on track or off track. So speaking of on or off track, when I be sensitive to the amount of time we have. Discipline, habits aligned with your goals. Let me skip ahead a little bit. What can you do to, hey, Tenzin, is my screen is flickering a bit. Is it okay on your end for everybody that's
Yeah,
watching?
yeah, it's okay on my end. It's
No,
not flickering.
okay, great. So what can you do to help with discipline, to help get these things on track, right? So maybe you say, and this might not be the best long-term example, although, in some cases, you're still going to get work from insurance companies, right? So maybe it's, hey, we realize that we've got to pay attention to adjusters. We work with them on jobs, and we've got our two or three or four or five that refer us on a regular basis, but we deal with hundreds of adjusters a year, and we don't do anything to maintain and build relationships and really work diligently in a disciplined way about getting them to refer. So, maybe you use something like this. You create it yourself, where I've got all these one-page PDF challenges that I share with clients. Maybe it's, you go back to one of my things that, one of my head trash moments was, I'm the only person that can do it, right? And, in this document, I say, catch yourself saying, did anybody ever say, I'll just do it myself, right? If it's going to get done right, if it's going to get done on time, I have to do it myself. So maybe you need to get disciplined about delegating and print this out, keep track of it. Delegate something small every day. Delegate something more significant every week. Maybe use a spreadsheet to keep track of things. One of my clients is really disciplined about different sales activities that he does daily, and he likes to track it on a spreadsheet. Uh, this is inspired by this company scorecard idea, where you have a scorecard with weekly goals at the leadership level, no more than 8 to 10, and then you have a scorecard by department. Or so, for example, you might have one for managers, for production managers, another one for sales reps, another one for field technicians, another one for admins. Very simple. Again, back to the idea of 2 to 5 numbers tracked weekly, so that everybody knows if they're on track or if they're off track, and they're not waiting around for that quarterly or annual review that might not ever come. Uh, just some other tools. Again, there's something that I've used and a lot of my clients use to help them with recurring tasks. We all have to do these things that are weekly, monthly, quarterly, daily, annually. Great task manager with the ability to link videos and documents to it. Uh, Again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to get into how I use all these tools, but the the big thing that I want everybody to really think about today is the idea of discipline. Like, what can you do? Because if you get really intentional about doing something to improve your business, it's going to pay dividends for years. Uh, like again, going back to when I decided I've got to get a really great understanding of my business financials, and I need to be able to set up my chart of accounts so that my P&L tells a very, very accurate story. And I need to get disciplined about reviewing my cash and my accrual P&Ls every month. And I need to get disciplined about reviewing job filtered P&Ls in a very disciplined way for mitigation and for reconstruction. And another thing that I wrote down that Phil talked about briefly was budgeting. Another thing, if you aren't budgeting jobs now, if your team doesn't know what they're shooting for, how could they ever possibly hit it, right? So if you have the complaint that your team isn't getting you the profitability that you're looking for, are you? And maybe you are, and maybe there's a different course of action to get things on track. But maybe it's simply because you're not setting a budget before you start the job, and you're not doing a debrief meeting after the job and going through the process of what did you like best about how that job ran? What are we going to do differently next time to improve profitability, right? Maybe it's as simple as getting that discipline in place. Uh, so again, I'm going to leave tens in a few minutes to close, but what I would love for each one of you to do is just write it down right now. What's the one area that you're going to focus on? This is a great time too, because here we are, not much time left in 2024, and it's going to be time, or it is time. A lot of my clients have already started putting together their 2025 plan. Maybe it's that. Maybe you haven't done a planning process with your team. Maybe you haven't done that in the past, right? So maybe that's the one thing that you're going to write down, that you're going to get really disciplined about planning and coming up with an execution plan after, so that it's not just, you've probably all, back when you started your business, probably all come up with some kind of business plan, but are you following it? Are you living it every day? So what's the one thing that you're going to work on? And then what's the one next action you can take to move forward? Right? Maybe it's a schedule a meeting, right? Maybe it's we've got to come up with a cash flow management plan. Maybe it starts with just getting whoever's involved in that together for a meeting where you have a brainstorm session for about an hour and just start putting together a plan. Maybe that's the next action. Or maybe you've got a process already, documented process, but it's not being followed. So what's the next action there? Again, maybe it's setting up a meeting and pulling out that process and refreshing everybody's memory, tweaking it, adjusting it, right? Maybe you've got new team members that weren't a part of the creation of that process, and it's just kind of fallen out of sight. So maybe it's time to resurrect it. So put it on your calendar now. Like all these things personally and professionally that I avoided doing, didn't want to do, told myself I couldn't do. I can point to so many different things that I look back now and I just think I'm so glad that I took an interest, that I pushed myself, that I had somebody help push me and took action in those areas. So I think accountability, an accountability partner is critical. So I started in 2005, first time in business for myself. And 6 months later, I hired a business coach because even though I'm pretty naturally disciplined, it was the first time in my life that I didn't have a manager. And I decided I would benefit if I hired a business coach. And almost nonstop from '06 to today, I still have a business coach because I love knowing that somebody's going to say, and I'll pick on you again, Tenzin, I love somebody saying to me, hey, Tenzin, did you do what you said you were going to do? Right? Or, hey, Scott, did you do what you said you were going to do? Right? I know in the 2 weeks in between our calls, I made a commitment, not just to myself, but to my coach, and it just helps me. So, maybe it's not a coach that you pay for. Maybe it's a business partner. Maybe it's a mentor. Maybe it's a team member or team members. So if you think back to this book and the scorecard idea, uh, leaders need to be on the scorecard also in the world, according to Scott, anyway. Because if it's, the old lead by example, right? If I'm going to hold you accountable and expect you to follow through on commitments, then you should be able to rely on me, your leader, to do the same, right? So maybe it's team members who help hold you accountable, and then maybe a coach. Let's see. All right, one more time because it's all about my goal, right? What are you ready to change? What's your commitment? What do you well, like? I want today to be the day where you say, you know what, I'm going to stop ignoring whatever that important thing is to you and take some kind of action. All right. So you ever want to reach out? QR code takes you to my site, and happy to talk anytime. Thanks, Tenzin. Thank you, Phil. Thanks. Great presentation. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the relationship with Karma. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Scott. Thanks to both Scott and Philip for sharing your valuable insights today. And I found all the information really, really helpful. And I'd also like to extend a big thank you to everyone who's joined us for the session. Right now, I'm going to take some time to do a Q&A. So what we're going to do is, if anybody has any questions that they want to ask, please raise your hand. I do have one question for each one of you. Phil, earlier you mentioned about importance of leadership in being an indicator of whether or not our business is going to be successful. What's your opinion on experience with bringing excellent managers externally or grooming them from inside out? What's your opinion on that?
So the first thing I want to say, I took on the chat, I put in a link to the book that Scott was talking about, Traction. So there, I think it kind of looks messy there. So one of the things that I like grooming and developing leaders from within, because people, there's a lot of risk in saying, I want that outside leader. For executive positions, senior positions, you may have to get outside your business. A lot of the decisions, a lot of leadership comes at the mid-level manager and even down to the front line. And so I like developing leaders from within. And there was actually a Robin Sharma book that I like, and it's a good tool and resource for that. It's called The Leader Who Had No Title. And it's about how we can be leaders wherever we are in the organization. And so, yeah, sometimes we're going to bring something from outside, but I think a lot of times we get to develop the people because they have our culture, we know their character, and they can help support our growth plan. So I'm a fan of probably a little bit of both, but mostly internal.
Thank you so much, Phil. And to you, Scott, earlier you mentioned about expectations that you can set, that you can keep track of. I don't want to give the whole recipe away, but what are some common ones that you have found to be a pattern, expectations, measurables that can be implemented to managers or any other position that you think has been really helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. I was hoping you were going to ask me the same question that you asked Phil, because I would have said ditto. Like, I feel the same way as Phil does.
Gotcha.
So we only have 3 minutes. I was going to share my screen again, but I'll hold off on that. So so many thoughts come to mind for a manager. Gross profit of the jobs that they're managing, right? Are they hitting the target or not? Revenue that they're either generating through referrals, maybe adjuster relationships, and earned revenue. So how much work is actually being produced every week? Another one is how many dollars are being collected by a manager? A technician, or, again, to Phil's point, do we have technicians signing jobs? Whoever is going out to sign jobs. I talked to a potential client this morning, and they told me that their closing rate is 35% on water mitigation jobs. So, is that a good number? I don't think so. right? So I think closing rate by the person who's signing the job, critical. How many Google reviews are they getting, right? I mean, sounds kind of silly and low level, but at the same time, I think we would all probably recognize that Google reviews are like gold. Uh, for a sales rep, I like to think of leading activities and then goal activity. So what is the activity level that we expect of an outside sales rep? How many face-to-face visits? How many scheduled meetings with decision makers? And then again, how many referrals? Because it's different in different businesses. Is the person generating the referral being expected to sign the job or not? Does that become a production uh, goal? So maybe for the business development person, it's just number of referrals per week. If any of you ever want to talk about this, feel free, book a call with me. There's so many different, and I think by role, you can really narrow it down to the 2 to 5 most critical for the success in each role. And so that it's not this big, overwhelming number for the employee.
Thank you so much, Scott.
Thanks.
So yeah, if anybody else has any questions, please feel free to raise them now. Um, but before we sign off, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge and pay our respects to those working tirelessly to restore communities affected by Hurricanes Milton and Helene. Without their efforts, the restoration of these communities would be far more challenging. So we're really grateful for the essential work all these restoration companies are doing in bringing recovery to those affected. And as we close, I would like to let you know that I'll be sending a follow-up email shortly. This will include a feedback form where you share your thoughts on today's session, the contact information for both Scott and Phillip, a special preview of our next webinar where we're going to talk about how to effectively manage a remote teams in the restoration industry, which is an increasingly important topic as shared by Phil and Scott both. So once again, thank you for your time and participation, everyone. Stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you at our next restoration webinar. Again, thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
Scott.
Thanks, Phil.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh no, end it, just AI left. End the meeting for all.